I often ask financial advisors this question. If every single one of their clients took a survey and had a number of questions on it, and one of the questions was fill in the blank. You see your advisor as blank. The question I ask is not necessarily what would their clients fill in the blank, but would they like what they heard? Would they like what they read? After 32 years of doing it, here's really what it comes down to. Are you seen as a salesperson, or are you seen as a trusted advisor? I think most of you know the truth, but at the end of the day, it doesn't always have to be that way. I was just recently working in a workshop where we were working through the process of an individual rep thinking through, if my client was asked how they saw me, what would I want the answer to be? And I'm not talking about that I am trusted, that they value me, that I'm knowledgeable. But at the end of the day, I could trust, as a client, I could trust my advisor. I could think they're very knowledgeable. I could think they represent a world-class company. But if a survey asked me what I thought, I'd say they're a salesman. They sell me stuff. I like them. Great guy, great gal. I trust them. But at the end of the day, they're a salesperson. That's what most clients would say. And so the real question becomes, what would you want them to say? And start with that. So I'm going to give you, if I was still an advisor, what I would want my client to say. I would want my client to say, Jim is my number one advocate. Jim is my financial coach. Jim holds me accountable. Jim is my chief financial advocate. He's an advisor that works with me, that gives me tremendous hope in the light at the end of the tunnel. He helps me build a plan. He holds me accountable to stay on track. He genuinely cares. He takes time to understand me. We meet on a fairly regular basis, so he's aware of changes. And ultimately, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't have Jim on my team. He's my advocate. Something similar to that. So if that's also what you would want your clients to say about you, you have to sit back and say, would they, right? Because what I have witnessed is that more often than not, if a client was asked that question, it would somehow, some way end with the conclusion that they're a salesperson, right? And so that's really what I want to talk to you about. Why is that? Well, let's take Covey's principle and begin with the end in mind. When you are able to articulate how you'd want your client to answer that question, then what you have to do is you have to look at your behavior with that client and ask yourself, based on that behavior, would they say that? So let me give you a few examples of that. If your client's going to say that you're their financial advocate, you're their coach, you're on their team, you care, you've put together a plan, and so on and so forth, would you only have discussions around ways that generate revenue for you? So for example, I work with reps all the time that give me example after example where they'll meet with a client, a potential client, an existing client, and they'll spend a lot of time focused on doing things to gather assets that they can manage, putting insurance policies in place that are part of a plan, and they will relentlessly pursue those tasks that are in the best interest of the client, but also is very clear to the client that that's how they get paid. But take this example. If in an annual review, you're meeting a client that you've clearly had a conversation over the past that they need to get with an estate attorney and at least do a will and power of attorney healthcare benefits, but you're a financial advisor and you talked about it in last year's annual meeting. But now when you gather this year in the annual meeting this year, you find out that they still haven't done it. Do you pursue them in a fashion that sends a message to get that done as much as you pursue them to buy additional life insurance, to gather additional assets under management? Ask yourself those questions, because what would happen if you were a true advisor is you'd be able to look at that person and say, that client, and say, listen, we can't do this anymore. My number one job is to help you avoid procrastination. We've had multiple conversations that you've got to get a will done. You've got to get power of attorney benefits done, and you haven't done that. I can tell you I've done a really good job with your overall financial plan, but if you and your spouse got hit by a bus tomorrow, it would still be a big cluster and a big problem without those legal documents. We got to get that done. When can I count on you to meet with an attorney and get that done? Because it's important. And I could give you multiple other examples like that because the client knows that you don't get paid. So I would say the number one area that reps could work on in order to be viewed the way they want to be viewed is, first and foremost, remember, it doesn't really have anything to do with what you say. It has everything to do with your behavior and what you do. So start by articulating what you want your clients to say, how they view you, and then look at your behavior and see if they're in sync. Spend a little think time talking about what would I have to do differently in my behavior for absolutely my clients to say that about me. And I think there'll be a lot of aha moments there. So that's the first area. The second area of being more of an advisor is really taking time to methodically understand their story. Making sure that the meeting is not about you, it's about them. And when it's about them, it's imperative that you understand them. And you do that by talking a lot less. You do that by asking a lot more questions. And you do that by being a very, very effective listener. So at the end of the day, the key ingredients to a client viewing you as a true, trusted advisor, as opposed to a salesperson, is don't always call them when you want to sell them something. Talk to them passionately about areas equally that you get paid in versus that you don't get paid in. Seek to understand. Get to know them. Be a great listener. And ultimately, when your client feels as if you really, really understand them and you genuinely care about them, they begin to implicitly trust you. And when those things happen and come together, you're now an advocate, you're now a coach, you're now an advisor, and you're no longer viewed as a salesperson. That's when you can move mountains, and that's when you can begin to tap in your true God-given potential in this industry. I wish you the best of luck. God bless.